Hello, this is Professor Montoya, and I'm going to be speaking about architectural rendering techniques and show you some of the different illustration styles that appear in this book, which is attached as a PDF onto the module. It doesn't have much explanation other than was it 243 types of different drawings that have been done. And it is rather dated, but the techniques are not dated. So let's take a look. This is an older architectural rendering book. It was something I've seen during my time in school. The style, of course, is dated, but the type and way that you do the rendering is not. So let's take a look. When we first start out, we want to start doing these simpler line drawings. We do have a section that's about landscape. We want to cover different types of items like the building, but then also put it in a site and then also add people. And this is one method. We're doing hard line drawing followed by some of this loose type of drawing of landscape plants. And as you scroll through, you can kind of see the different kinds of options that you have. One thing I want to kind of introduce you to is that when you do your line drawing, it's possible that you can just make the drawing itself, and then instead of potentially ruining a drawing by not knowing what you're doing or you make a mistake, you can make a copy of it onto watercolor paper or a good harder backed paper, and then you can practice different techniques. Here we can see crosshatch being used, dark lights, and then other options could be a softer kind of technique, maybe with pencil instead of ink, or it could be hardline ink drawing using hatch marks, a lot of the squiggles, so it's a blend of the hard line of the architecture where there's some perspective in here, and then there's also the curving lines of nature. Many variations, and then adding color. This is a monotone, meaning if you had used that pack of markers and you just had all yellows and deeper parts of yellow, you could do it this way and substitute, or you can just go full bore and use all your markers to create a very almost more realistic scene. This one's a little bit more toned down, so this one actually is more professional. So here's something to note. This is more artistic, but this is something you might typically see in the profession. It shows a lot more restraint, and then you don't document the details that you aren't really interested in. And here I would take it that the gazebo is probably, and the entrance is the most important, but check out the people too, right? Because we're going to do some figure drawing somewhere around week 8. And I wanted to show you some of my favorites. Here's a little banter and detour. Check this out, using hatch marks on curved surfaces, and very unusual architecture, but popular in its day, and it still is popular. It's just not in wide mass appeal. It comes from this guy a lot of times, Paulo Soleri. You might have heard Paulo Soleri, but he has a nice city. He attempted to build a city in Arizona using all kinds of new construction techniques with ancient and more primitive types of shell casting. Most famous, though, are these bells, and these are the bells that you might see on web pages. I guess you could call it hippie, but I call it more native, more rustic. Pretty cool stuff, still valuable today and still fetches a high premium. That ends that detour, or jumps back into different styles of architecture. This is a favorite of mine, very clean. Okay, so it's mainly showing the lines and then showing some materiality, material hatches. This little, I guess you kind of have to zoom in to see all the small parts that are happening that make this entire lawn. And same with the tree. But sometimes you have very just basic lines, and this is my idea of sketching. Do you know this building? This is Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. It was voted the most, I guess, the most beautiful, or at least the most American type of architecture in our day, 1939, Frank Lloyd Wright. And this is one of his masterpieces. It's a building built over a waterfall. I don't think the EPA would let you get away with it today, but at that time it was pretty fantastic. You could sit on the porch and the water is rolling underneath you. And it looks like there's a lot of drawings of this because it is so famous. It's in Bear Run, Pennsylvania, if you're ever out that way. Here's a drawing using stipple, just dots. So you lay on the ink and then you drop back, and the more ink dots you put down, the darker you'll have your tones. Finally, we're getting to more realistic, and you can go full bore, realistic. This is something you might see in an office. Okay, and then my next stop is 182. While I'm right here, though, this is the type of people we're going to make. We'll be doing line drawings to create people, because one thing that architecture does need is people to show the scale of a building. Let's go to one of my favorites, 189. Here's a very active piece. This has a full cityscape. It has perspective going on. It has the landscape going on, and it has people. And it has vehicles. So lots of activity within this drawing. And then 226. This is since we are the classical school, this is probably something you might consider as this type of rendering, a little bit softer, more refined. You have your classical pieces in it. They refer to the modern version of that classicism. We have our archways. And the good thing about archways is they capture light and dark, seen here in this little portion. And those are great to work with. We are going to be also painting Old Barn. I have a Barn Again project, and this is in anticipation of our certificate for rural architecture, or I guess what it's called is historic architecture, which might be coming up in a few years. So we want to get the rural and rustic in with our landscape. Here's a picture that can most likely come out of our portfolio. 226 is our next stop, so I guess we'll just scroll through. No rush. Here's using watercolor techniques with line, with horizon. Yes, it is a perspective, but you can follow the roof line. And courtyards, these are actually one of the most common type of sketches that you'll see is the court space for people. Many municipalities need these kind of drawings because they're doing a vision. They're doing a vision board of what the future could be. And I also do a little of that future forecasting using drawings. Let's go take a look. One thing I like to do is take an older concept vehicle like this car, and this is an old Lincoln Continental, but to apply your drawing skills, going to pick up the old, you can help someone else visualize where they're taking their idea. It's a perfect marker style drawing where you leave white space, you have that hard line. This is actually how I got started in the architectural rendering, is by drawing cars, and so this one is pretty cool. I like here you work with these markers as energy forces, and you work with a lot of shading, and if you're really good, you introduce the cotton ball technique, where you take a dust of chalk. Let's see if we can find it. We use once we have our line drawing down, we just lightly put chalk down, and then we move it with a cotton ball. It's pretty cool, so I'll show you how to do that technique as well. We return back to the courtyard scene, This time some event is taking place in the night. You can also create a lot of drama by introducing atmosphere, darkness, a different sky color altogether into the project, and that really pops out what you're trying to capture. And here it's this nighttime festivity. Okay, the next stop is 226. Actually, I almost know a version of this building somewhere in town, so it seems like that glass is very popular. Here's one for me. This is Florida. You can tell you have your egret, you have these long pine cones, and then you have the palm trees and that Miami style of, maybe that could be Hilton or something. I just do that for a little nostalgia. Being that I'm in Utah now, for those of you who are tuning in who don't know exactly what's happening to me when I see that image. Okay, so perspective. This could be UVU, and we're going to be capturing these long stripes. I mean, we are blessed with having on this campus many long perspective views. I think the planners really worked with that almost to the maximum. You can stand some places on campus and see far out into the distance. This is a popular idea for city municipalities that also want to redecorate their downtown, and they're going to make a proposal for it. And yes, you could do this in Revit, but the idea behind simple hand drawing and rendering is that it's going to be friendly and people user friendly, so that it does strike an emotional chord when you look at it that way. Okay, wait for it. Wait. Okay, now here's a very simple. Look how simplistic and minimalistic that is. Okay, and maybe that still gets an A just because sometimes simple things are harder to do than complicated things. They say that because there's a lot of stuff that you edit out. Here's a kind of drawing that we'll be making, a perspective with texture and people in it. This could be UVU too, but same era perhaps. I like these. I'm starting to like these because this is just using scratching kind of lines to create a form. And lastly, my favorite of all. Okay, and you're going to think I'm crazy now, but it's just about the volumes of space. And for me, I'm about a creator, that creative start. Finishing up is a little bit harder for me to do, and adding details is a little bit even more harder than that. But just that creative start where your mind fills in a lot of the missing things, and you could see the shine on. Here's the same things, like just like that car. I got a little shine on the floor. I have volumes in space, and I have things shooting out into the distance. So my love of cars there comes back to this style of architecture. And that concludes this portion. You're welcome to scan through the drawings here. I would really like it if you kind of looked at a few and you might take away some ideas. And remember, there's many things going on. You could take away the perspective ideas, color ideas, and hatch mark or line type techniques. Thank you very much, and I hope this has been helpful to you.